2 minutes until forward bay cover jettisoning. Orion 100,000 feet now. The spacecraft about to go subsonic. "45 seconds until forward bay cover jettisoning. Orion now at 50,000 feet. Forward bay cover jettisoning pyros are on. "25,000 feet. Drogues have been deployed. Two good drogue shoots reported by the recovery team out in the Pacific. The descent rate is right on the money. Orion's velocity now down to 282 miles an hour. Range to splashdown 1.5 miles. 10,000 feet now. And we're on mains. 5,000 feet. Reefing in progress. Three good main shoots for Orion. We have three fully inflated main chutes. Time to splashdown 90 seconds. Perfect descent rate reported. And there it is, High over the Pacific, America's new ticket to ride to the moon and beyond now in view. Orion under its chutes descending toward splashdown. Orion in the perfect orientation for splashdown, just seconds away. (1,000 feet). Good descent rate. (500 feet). Splashdown. From Tranquility Base to Taurus Littrow to the tranquil waters of the Pacific, the latest chapter of NASA's journey to the moon comes to a close. Orion, back on Earth. Unofficial splashdown time, 11:40 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time. At a mission elapsed time of 25 days, 10 hours, 54 minutes, 50 seconds. That's unofficial. Splashing down off the coast of Baja, California. Once again, splashdown occurring at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, west of Baja, California, after a textbook entry for the Orion spacecraft, bringing its 25-and-a-half-day mission to an end. And we are now receiving word that all 5 of the crew module uprighting system bags are fully inflated. So that's exactly what we had hoped for. Orion safely bobbing up and down in the Pacific Ocean. This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at the Orion spacecraft that splashed down about 6.5 minutes ago at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time. We are estimating that it splashed down around 5 nautical miles away from the USS Portland. The recovery ship and Navy boats and divers will be approaching the vehicle before long. The spacecraft is in what is called a Stable 1 configuration, upright, just the way we had expected it to be. 5 perfectly inflated crew module uprighting system bags, maintaining a nice gentle configuration for Orion. First of the Navy helicopters now approaching the vehicle. And here in Mission Control, some of Orion's systems no longer needed are being powered down. Many of them will stay powered up for the next 2 hours while we conduct a series of test objectives to characterize the thermal conditioning of the spacecraft. That will be important for future data for crewed missions to determine how long the crews can remain comfortable inside a vehicle returning from the moon. We also will be conducting tests of the beacon and SARSAT system for maintaining tracking of the spacecraft, for recovery forces that will be approaching the spacecraft in the future. And coming up in the next hour and a half will be the reactivation of an ammonia boiler system that will provide cooling in the spacecraft, as it will when crews return from their missions on board Orion. This is Mission Control Houston. Reports from the USS Portland indicate that the first of two Navy helicopters flying in the vicinity of Orion, which is about 5 nautical miles away from the ship, indicate no damage to the spacecraft and no hazardous fuel leaking from the spacecraft. A good view of the helicopters and the initial Navy boats that will be approaching Orion a short time from now. Once again, the splashdown occurring at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Mission Control Houston. Orion in the Pacific Ocean, having splashed down at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, around 5 nautical miles or so from the USS Portland. A textbook entry for the vehicle. On the USS Portland at this hour, my colleague Daryl Nell from the Kennedy Space Center, who's with the Exploration Ground Systems Recovery Team. Daryl, how did it look to you? It certainly looked textbook to us here.
I'd say that's a great description, Rob. Perfectly landed here in the Pacific Ocean, and that's been confirmed by the operations manager that I just spoke to. Watching it from the deck as an observer, we have, as you can see, some broken clouds in the sky, like right around 3,000 feet. But we saw those 3 full main parachutes pop out. It was a beautiful sight, probably just about, several thousand feet in the sky. And then we watched that slow descent as the Orion crew module made its way down to the Pacific Ocean. Saw the splash. And then, of course, the assets aboard the USS Portland here immediately started making their way towards the splashdown site. And as you see live now, they are close to being next to the capsule. Now, the helicopters that you see flying there, those are MH-60s. We have 2 of them in the air, and they are right now gathering high-quality, high-definition imagery of the capsule in the water. There's a spotter aboard. We have photographers as well. The doors are completely open on both sides of the helicopters, and so you can see them flying a circular track around the splashdown location. They have marked, if you can see it, you can see what looks like smoke coming off the location just to the left there. That is the boats having marked location where some of the debris has come down, the debris that was part of the separation event, the part of the parachutes opening event. So you have the sabot as well as the lid from the parachutes. All of that is being tracked by the Sasquatch team, and the Navy boats are marking that with floatable smoke grenades. All of that hardware the team wants to recover because there's valuable information and data in it. The helicopters will be out for another 20 minutes gathering imagery. You can see one of them getting very close to the crew module. There is an GSS camera, ultra high definition, 8K, which is gathering imagery. We are currently on course to go right by the splashdown location, so we are right about 3.5 miles and closing. We are going to a point that's going to be 1 mile out. That's our next waypoint. 1 mile out from the splashdown location. One of the things we're waiting for is for ammonia boil-off, and that's why the Navy boats are not yet next to the capsule. We're still going to wait that out. The amount of time that that's going to take is has not been determined. They have allowed for as much as 2 hours. The ammonia on the capsule is used for cooling purposes, to keep the cabin cool for crew. Of course, there's no crew in this capsule, but for future missions, it will certainly be an important part of keeping the astronauts cool during the heat of reentry. But for now, they're going to vent off that ammonia, and as they do that, it's not quite safe to get close to the capsule with the Navy divers. So of course we'll keep our eyes fixed to the location, our cameras as well. The USS Portland's standing by for our next waypoint, 1 mile from the splashdown site. And then once the completion of the ammonia boil-off, the Navy boats will be going in. A spectacular sight from out here, Rob. Toss it back to you.
Thanks, Daryl. Back here in Mission Control, the entry Flight Director Judd Freeling on the left. To his left, Flight Director Rick Henfling. And with me on console here, probably none more important than the NASA Administrator, Bill Nelson. Senator, thank you for joining us today.
Rob, I'm overwhelmed. You know, I'd say it's good to see you, but this is an extraordinary day.
I remember years ago when I saw you return on Columbia from your mission into space, and it all conjures up a tremendous amount of memories. Orion back on Earth, having circumnavigated the moon, having survived a critical test of its heat shield, I think you have to be hesitant to celebrate and throw confetti a little bit too early, but it certainly is an important achievement, is it not?
It's historic because we are now going back into space, into deep space, with a new generation. Kennedy just stunned everybody with the Apollo generation and said that we were going to achieve what we thought was impossible, and did that in a short period of time. And many things have happened since, but we knew we were going back, but we knew we were going back to the moon just to continue to explore outward into the cosmos. And so that's why this is a defining day. It is one that marks new technology, a whole new breed of astronaut, a vision for the future that captures the DNA of particularly Americans, although we do this as an international venture. And that DNA is we are adventurers, we are explorers. We always have a frontier, and that frontier is now to continue exploring the heavens.
We had to wait a while for Artemis to finally get to the point where the Space Launch System got us underway back on November 16th, but once it did, these engineers and the other members of the team's front room, back room, they've been pretty giddy over the amount of data that they've required and how this vehicle appears to have exceeded its expectations in its performance.
The whole vehicle, the rocket, the European participation in the support module, the spacecraft itself, Orion, performing so well that they added a lot of tests. And lo and behold, we're going to be up to our ears in data, thankfully. And of course, today the two main things that had to happen was that that heat shield had to work, and it did beautifully, where they can skip off the atmosphere and bleed that speed down from 25,000 miles an hour And then the parachutes had to work, and they did it as well.
You know, the engineering, the design of this mission, all the work that will go into the next flight when a crew is on board, right, to orbit the moon. What does this say about NASA and the international partner cooperation and the partnership that ultimately takes us not only to the moon but beyond?
Well, it says a lot about our country because we don't do it secretively. We do it openly, and we do it with our friends, and we invite all peoples of the earth. And we are doing it also with commercial partners, because when we go into orbit on Apollo 3, we are going to rendezvous and dock with in this case, SpaceX lander, and the crew will go down to the surface. And then we have another competition going on now for another lander, so that we will have 2 landers. And again, this is the program of going back to the moon to learn, to live, to invent, to create in order to explore beyond.
50 years ago today, Gene Cernan, Jack Schmitt landed their lunar module Challenger on Taurus Littrow, the final lunar landing. It only seems fitting half a century later to the day, Orion back home.
And what a fitting opportunity that I had last night to sit with Jack Schmitt at the astronaut dinner and to talk to him about those experiences. 50 years, it's a long time, but look what we have done in the meantime. The space shuttle, we built the International Space Station, we brought in commercial partners. We now go to and from regularly the International Space Station with cargo and crew. And here we go. We've got scouts going to the moon that are commercial scouts that land, that take NASA instruments and scientific instruments in preparing us for the landings of our astronauts. And so it's a new day. A new day has dawned. An Artemis generation is taking us there.
And Orion continues to await the arrival of the USS Portland, which shouldn't be very much longer from now, and some flight test objectives that will be taking place over the next couple of hours before we here in Houston hand the vehicle over to the Kennedy Space Center recovery team. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, pleasure to see you today, and thank you so much for being with us.
What a day. Oh, it is my great privilege.
This is Mission Control Houston, 26 minutes after the return of Orion from its circumnavigation of the moon and a splashdown in the Pacific, a bullseye splashdown, just about 5 nautical miles away from the USS Portland, as had been planned. The Portland about to arrive near the spacecraft, as you heard from Daryl Nail, who at this moment is standing by on the Portland with the woman in charge of the recovery operations, Melissa Jones. Daryl?
Thank you, Rob. That's right. Melissa Jones, the recovery director, just came from outside the ship's control center where she was monitoring and, of course, managing her team in the midst of this recovery. So, Melissa, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is an exciting day.
What a day it is, right? We just had splashdown, and want to ask you, first of all, operationally, where do we stand and what do we have to go?
So we had a picture-perfect splashdown, and at this time we're gathering data. With the CM powered up, we'll get some flight test objective data on thermal conditioning, and we're doing some signal data with the tri-band beacons, making sure that we can see the beacons on the capsules and on the astronaut suits to prepare for Artemis 2. And once that is complete, the vehicle will be powered down by the Mission Control Center, and they'll hand that over officially to us here locally in the Pacific. And then we will approach the capsule and attach some lines to it and pull it into the back of the well deck.
And that's a delicate mission, right? Because you will be attaching lines, and through the use of Navy boats and then also a winch inside the well deck, and Navy sailors on the lines attached to it as well. seems like a very delicate operation, especially getting in the well deck where waves will be sloshing around. And we've got already 4 to 5 foot seas out here in the Pacific.
Correct. So it is a delicate balance to try to control the capsule in the well deck with all the water that we have in there, and to softly land it on the cradle so that we can capture as much data from the heat shield as possible.
Now, as the capsule was coming down, just briefly tell me your reaction that moment that it splashed down.
So when they called capture from the helicopters, it was the most amazing feeling. It's just been a long time coming. We've been working this mission for a while, and we've done a ton of training. And every time you do training with a mock-up capsule, you don't have any of that. You don't have parachutes. You don't, hear it coming back to the atmosphere, the sonic booms and all of that kind of stuff. And today that actually happened. It's just amazing.
And your team, it's worth noting, has been out here a long time. From the moment of launch, you were on console, ready to support if something off-nominal happened, unusual. You were going to be able to recover that capsule wherever it was needed to recover. So you were working that and then stayed through Thanksgiving all the way to now. So it's been a long road.
It has been, yeah. Several of us supported launch, and then we deployed out here about 23 days before, and we're out here for Thanksgiving as a team. So we have been waiting for this and preparing for it for a while.
And it looks like you're doing a great job so far. Good luck the rest of the way, Melissa Jones, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right, Rob?
Thank you, Daryl. We'll be back to you on the USS Portland here shortly as the post-splashdown activities and the recovery operations will continue. As mentioned earlier, it will take about 2 hours from the time of splashdown until the time that Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of entry flight controllers here will hand the vehicle over to the Exploration Ground System Recovery Team that will work over the next several hours to bring the Orion into the well deck of the USS Portland. With me, a familiar face, Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator. Bob, it's great to see you here. And with Orion back on Earth, another milestone accomplished on the road back to putting Americans on the surface of the moon. In terms of the criticality of what we've seen over the past 4 weeks, your thoughts on how this mission evolved and now the stepping stone that would put a crew on board a couple of years from now?
Oh, Rob, it's been absolutely critical to get this mission off safely. This test flight is what we need in order to prove this vehicle so that we can fly with a crew, and that's the next step, and I can't wait. The launch, first off, yeah, I was on the roof of the Launch Control Center. I went up there with the administrator and deputy administrator when we came out of the T-minus 10-minute hold, and it was phenomenal. It was absolutely amazing. The rocket performed flawlessly, and I haven't been that happy in a long time after we came down off the roof. And then to see the mission go as well as it did, the shots that we got from the vehicle, that one from 40,000 miles away where you saw the moon with the Earth in the background. And then this morning, I mean, we've learned how to operate this vehicle. A few minor glitches along the way, but it is performed flawlessly. And we're learning how to work with it, operate it. And that's what this JSC team does. It is so great to be back here in mission control, to be with the ops team. I'm so proud of these guys. Amazing. But if you were watching this morning, I loved the video. I don't know if it was on NASA TV or not, but the moon the Earth just kept getting bigger and bigger. It was really hauling as it came in. And the preciseness with which they were able to bring it down and seeing the chutes come out, and it's just, I'm so proud of this team, the Orion team, the entire SLS, Artemis team, the folks here at JSC. It's just been amazing. I wish Gene Cernan were still alive. Here we are on the 50th anniversary, and Gene was such a proponent of getting us back to the moon. I wish he were alive to have seen this mission. It would have meant a lot to him.
I don't want to date you, but I think 24 years ago, at this moment in time, you were building a space station, I believe, with your crew on STS-88. We had so many dramatic, jaw-dropping images during the course of this flight. What for you was the most impactful moment?
Oh, I'm not sure I can pick one. Obviously, the launch. The team has worked so hard to get to the point where we successfully launched this rocket. I think the successful burns along the way to actually get that go for the TLI burn and do it and be on our way to the moon again. Absolutely awesome. I think the pictures that we saw, but the splashdown, how can you not? I mean, this was really emotional, going around and congratulating folks for what we did. So it's hard to pick just one. I think what has meant the most to me, more than just watching the mission, more than the mission highlights, is being with the teams at the Kennedy Space Center, at the Marshall Space Flight Center, here at the Johnson Space Center, and just being able to go up and talk to them and thank them for all their hard work that got us to where we are. I think it means a lot to me.
And Bob, final question. The next step, Artemis 2, putting a crew on a vehicle to orbit the moon. It's going to be a complicated mission. It's a long road. It seems like a long time from now, but based on what we've just witnessed and based on what we believe will be the ultimate data flow out of this mission, doesn't seem that far away, does it?
It is not that far away. It's going to mean a lot when we get the crew assigned. And we see them in training. We get that human face to this. I've seen the flight hardware at KSC. The Orion 2 spacecraft for Artemis 2 is there. It's in build. We got to get Artemis 1 back and transfer some of the black boxes across to make sure that they get checked out and everything works. The rocket's being built. We are on the way. And I think when you put a human face to that, when you actually see that, hey, we're sending humans to the moon again, and we're going to get this one-year cadence eventually where we're doing this on an annual basis, this is our future, and it's different from how we went during Apollo. We're going in a sustainable way. We're paving the way to go onto Mars, not just the moon and Mars, but to establish a presence in our solar system beyond our home planet, to explore, to have those technologies in space, to continue to learn and improve things here on planet Earth.
Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator. Thanks so much for being with us, Bob.
Rob, it is always a pleasure to share a mic with the voice of NASA. I think a lot of you, buddy, you know that. We've worked together a long time. You keep doing a great job.
Thank you very much, Bob. Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator, with us here in Mission Control. This is Mission Control Houston. About 37 minutes since Orion splashed down in the Pacific on the deck of the USS Portland, as he has been throughout the course of the morning. Daryl Nail, my colleague from the Kennedy Space Center. Daryl, how are things going out there? It looks like you're about to approach the vehicle.
Yeah, we're very close to that moment, Rob, here on the USS Portland. We're just about 100 miles off the coast of Baja, Mexico. The operation, as you've heard and been commentating, it is going pretty smoothly at this point. But we are in a pre-planned waiting period as we wait for the ammonia that is inside the capsule. It is used for cooling. This is boiling off at this moment into the atmosphere, and until that's complete, the boats will be on hold. Now, the Navy divers right now at this moment are outside of the 120-yard radius around the capsule. That was part of the plan. They will close within just a few feet to start detecting if there are any hazardous gases coming from the capsule. But that will only happen once our recovery director, Melissa Jones, has given them the go to close in. The ship, meanwhile, the USS Portland, is on its way to close within 2,000 yards of the capsule. As you can see it floating there, the bags fully inflated that are used to upright it, bright orange in color at the top of the capsule. The ship will then come alongside the capsule, and once the Navy divers have gone in and made sure that the capsule is safe to approach, they will begin taking imagery, photographs both on the top side of the water, and then also they have Navy divers prepared to go underneath the capsule and take pictures of the heat shield, the all-important component of this capsule, which is the primary objective in terms of the test and this flight test, is to make sure that that heat shield works and works well. So fresh from space, they want to make sure that they have images of it preserved as it is now before the operation begins, where they pull it into the well deck of the USS Portland. That will involve the attachment of ropes as well as a winch line that then connects to the USS Portland. The well deck of the USS Portland will be flooded to about 6 feet, and those Navy boats will attach their lines and then pull alongside the Navy vessel, connect to a winch line, and then carefully tow it into the well deck. Again, we are currently awaiting the completion of ammonia boil-off from the capsule. They've allowed for up to 2 hours, but it could take a shorter period of time. And once you see those Navy boats closing in, then you'll know that that ammonia boil-off is complete. Of course, we'll let you know when that happens. Live on the deck of the USS Portland, Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Daryl. Daryl Nail on the USS Portland out in the Pacific, west of Baja, California. Back here in Mission Control as the flight controllers watch over the initial phase of the recovery operations. We're joined by the director of the Johnson Space Center, Vanessa Weich. Vanessa, great Sunday to have you here with us on Console.
Fabulous Sunday. What a great day. You know, it's amazing to me everything that has been accomplished throughout this entire mission. But being here with the team and seeing and witnessing this splashdown together, amazing, wonderful. I really can't describe how I feel.
You know, we were talking just a moment ago, it never ceases to amaze me how these missions are designed. The execution is one thing, but the design of the mission here by the flight control team, and just down the hall, by the way, there are humans orbiting the Earth in the International Space Station, so it's almost like a 2-for-1 here. It
is. I mean, you know, to me this week, and well, for the past 26 days, being able to come into the control center and know that we had teams controlling the International Space Station with our crew members on board, and we've had, as you know, successfully crews living off of this planet for over 22 years, but then in another control center where we're monitoring and making sure that the maneuvers, everything that had to happen on the Orion spacecraft, that was being tracked, followed, and, you know, data, anything that needed to be sent up was just done so perfectly and professionally. This team has trained for years. First, you got to plan the mission, as you know. Then you have to execute the mission. And so the years of planning, the years of getting ready, the preparations really paid off.
You know, after a team wins the World Series like the Astros did, you can celebrate for about 24 hours before you have to worry about spring training that's coming up. There's almost never a moment to breathe. Artemis 2, not too far down the pike.
Yes, absolutely. So for us, you know, this is great. We've accomplished Orion 1, this test flight, being able to test out the heat shields, those parachutes, as you saw, brought the spacecraft down. But now we have to get it ready for our crews to be on board. So all of the systems that we need to integrate for our environmental controls, those are things that will be new as we go forward for Artemis 2. And then it's the outfitting of the cabin. All the things, simple things you think about if they're going to be going for 10 days. So we got to make sure that we have the food, we have the clothing, all of the things that they're going to need for their next trip. But there's a lot of additional training, there's a lot of additional planning that has to happen in order for us to be ready for Artemis 2.
Thank you so much. Vanessa Weich, the director of the Johnson Space Center. What a busy time this has been.
Oh, but I also, Rob, though, I want to say thank you and congratulations to all of the employees, our entire workforce here at NASA Johnson Space Center. But I also want to thank our European partners. I want to thank our industry partners. It took thousands of people to make this possible. And now the recovery that's being done by the Navy, just want to say major thank you to the brave individuals that are out, and they're going to be bringing the Orion spacecraft into the Portland, and then she'll be back going to Florida, and my friends in Florida are ready to receive her. We're super excited and just want to say thank you to everyone that has made this possible.
Thank you so much, Vanessa Weich, director of the Johnson Space Center. Time to celebrate just a little bit before we catch our breath and press on.
Yes, time to celebrate. Then we got to get ready for Artemis 2.
Vanessa Weich, thank you so much. Back here in Mission Control, it has now been 46 minutes since the splashdown of the Orion spacecraft to complete its 25-and-a-half-day mission. Flight controllers here in Houston reporting that the vehicle looks great. In the initial visual inspections being made by the helicopter teams, as you heard Daryl Nail reference just a short time ago. We just heard from Vanessa Weich, the Johnson Space Center director. Now let's turn our attention to the East Coast, to the Kennedy Space Center, where the director of the Kennedy Space Center, Janet Petro, is standing by with us. Janet, good afternoon, and what a moment as your exploration ground systems folks are hard at work out in the Pacific.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob. It's been a really, really exciting morning, and can't wait for our teams to get to work out there on the West Coast.
You know, we heard a short time ago from Melissa Jones from the deck of the USS Portland. How complicated has been the development of this recovery operation that your team is executing as we speak?
Well, it's pretty complicated, but, you know, our teams make it look easy. I will start out by saying, or giving, I should say, a big shout out to really Vanessa and her flight ops team and the whole Orion team to deliver an amazing mission, bringing us down through splashdown. But now it's over to Melissa and her team, and she's done an incredible amount of work to get to this point. You know, what we do at NASA, it really is all about collaborations, and the collaborations that we've had with the Department of Defense in particular over the past many years, their hard work and their dedication as they went through a great deal of planning, hardware development and processes and a lot of practicing to get to this point and make it look easy. You know, that capsule sitting out there on the ocean, it looks very similar to the Apollo capsule, but it's actually about 30% larger. And so the complexity of recovering that larger vehicle is a little bit more. But Melissa and her team have been practicing, you know, their latest underway recovery test they completed. It was the 9th one, and they completed that last November 21st of last year, 2021. So they're ready. Watching these teams precisely perform these recovery operations is amazing, and so I think we're going to have a really, really great day. I'm going to be traveling to San Diego to watch the ship come in port in a couple days, so I look forward to seeing that capsule on board the well-deck ship.
Janet, there's a lot of work to be done before Artemis 2, but the first milestone here will be getting the vehicle back to your center in Florida for a detailed inspection and detailed analysis. What's the basic timeline for all of that work?
Yeah, so Splashdown today is really the beginning of the journey back to KSC. So as I mentioned, I'll be there in San Diego when the ship comes into port in a couple of days, and then Orion will then be loaded onto a truck and transported back to the Kennedy Space Center, and that's going to take a couple of days because of road-related conditions. You know, the Orion will still have some residual hazardous waste on it, and of course planning the roadways as it gets trucked back to the Kennedy Space Center takes some careful navigation. So by the end of this month, the end of December, we expect to have Orion coming back onto our center. We think that's going to be a really great Christmas present for us here at the Kennedy Space Center. And it'll go right into our multi-payload processing facility for its post-flight assessment. And that's where the remaining residual hazardous fluids will be removed from it. And then just after the new year, the teams will be opening up the hatch of the Orion, and then once that's complete, I think Rob, you called it the moment of truth. They'll remove that heat shield and begin a really detailed inspection and assessment of how that heat shield performed during its reentry and recovery operation. So we're really looking forward. I know the whole team's really looking forward to see how that assessment comes out. And then after that, it's Orion's journey is not done. It'll be making its way up to the Glenn Research Center, where it will be doing some acoustic and further environmental testing up at that center. So journey isn't over. It's just kind of making its way here on the terrestrial path back. So thanks.
Janet Petro, the director of the Kennedy Space Center, joining us here today. Congratulations, Janet, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Rob. It's a great capstone to our 60th diamond anniversary to have Splashdown, successful Splashdown. So take care. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you again, Janet Petro, the director of the Kennedy Space Center, joining us today. Orion safely upright and stable 1 as the Navy and Exploration Ground Systems team continue to approach the vehicle in the first of a multi-hour choreography that will bring the vehicle into the well deck of the USS Portland. On the deck of the USS Portland right now is Darrell Nail, who has NASA astronaut Shannon Walker with him once again, post-splashdown this time. Darrell, how are things going out there?
Rob, we've got a front row seat to this operation. As you can see behind me, Shannon Walker, as you mentioned, NASA astronaut, joining me with this incredible view as we watch that capsule floating in the Pacific Ocean just 100 miles off of Baja, Mexico. We have an MH-60 Nighthawk helicopter encircling it and the Navy boats in the water. First of all, Shannon, how about this view?
It is an amazing view and so exciting to see the Orion capsule back on Earth.
That is a human-rated capsule that went around the moon and returned and is now in the Pacific Ocean. As an astronaut, what kind of thoughts do you have seeing a moment like this?
Well, it's actually really emotional to see something like this, knowing that the next time we're going to have people on that capsule, or the second Orion capsule. It's pretty amazing that we're going to be able to go back to the moon soon.
Incredible indeed. And as we look at, let's paint the picture for the audience as we look out at this operation. Currently in a moment where we are pausing for ammonia boil-off. That's the cooling that the Orion crew module uses to keep the astronauts cool inside the cabin as they wait to be taken out of the capsule. There's none in this one, but this would be a period in which that would happen. You can see the Navy boats. They are roughly outside of 120 yards from the capsule. They have equipment that will sniff out any hazardous gases near the Orion, and so they are holding in position until that ammonia boil-off happens. And then also in your view, you can see the MH-60 circling back around. It is leaning so the photographers inside and a high-resolution camera mounted on the side can get imagery of the capsule fresh from space. My question to you, Shannon, is as we watch this continue to wait and for the Navy divers to get closer, thoughts of Artemis 2 now come to mind. You've heard folks have been talking about it. Rob has been discussing it with many of the leadership around NASA. People want to know, well, who are the astronauts going to be for Astronaut 2?
Yeah.
So, any idea?
That is the question. No, I have no idea. Once we get this capsule back, we'll look it over and we'll be able to determine when Artemis 2 will actually be able to launch. And once we know that launch date, we'll figure out the right time to name the crew based on the training flow.
So there's actually a period of training in which you have to do a set amount of time to get ready for that, but really predicated on Artemis 2 and that launch date?
Absolutely. We don't want to have the crew just spinning their wheels if Artemis 2 is going to be a long way out, but I don't think it will be, so I would say sometime in the next 6 months maybe. Is it just a guess? Don't hold me to it. We might be naming the crew.
All right, very good. Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut, thanks for joining us today. One quick update and note, the recovery team was looking at the possibility of recovering the parachutes as well as the forward bay cover, but that is not going to happen this time. They did mark their locations, but they did slip below the surface of the ocean, and so no recovery of the parachutes or the forward bay cover. That's it from right here on the USS Portland. Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Daryl Nail on the deck of the USS Portland with NASA astronaut Shannon Walker. It's been almost an hour since Orion splashed down. Everything with the entry and splashdown went by the book. If you weren't with us for the final minutes of Orion's descent toward the Pacific Ocean, we have a replay after the deployment of the three main chutes, which were pulled out in sequential fashion after pilot parachutes and drogue chutes were deployed. The main chutes came out. They reefed in perfect fashion, slowly descending towards the splashdown that was marked at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, at a point about 5 nautical miles or so from the USS Portland, west of Baja California. Orion entered the Earth's atmosphere traveling 25 times the speed of sound. It decelerated to a splashdown velocity of just under 100 miles an hour. It was a very gentle splashdown for Orion. All of its entry milestones were performed in perfect fashion. 2 blackout periods in which the plasma around Orion built up, preventing data and communications with the spacecraft as a natural function of the heat of reentry, which was about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, twice as much as re-entering space shuttles and other crewed vehicles have experienced. But although some analysis must be performed now, and there's the splashdown itself as it occurred, analysis, as you'll hear in a moment from our next guest, must be conducted to make sure that everything went as had been prescribed on the heat shield particularly. And there's a live view of Orion as the Navy boats with the Navy divers and other recovery personnel begin to approach the spacecraft. With us here in Mission Control is Michelle Zahner, the Orion Mission Planning Lead from the Vehicle Integration Office. Michelle, Thank you for joining us today. And I guess the natural and the big question is, unbelievable that all this just ticked off in trip hammer fashion the way it was designed.
Yes, it was an incredible mission. So we accomplished all of our major mission objectives. The vehicle performed every bit as well as we hoped, and even better in a lot of ways. So as an example, the solar rays generated more power throughout the flight than we expected. So this is the furthest any human-rated spacecraft has ever gone, and that required a lot of complex analysis and mission planning and trajectory planning ahead of the mission, and to see it all come together and have such a successful test mission was amazing.
Michelle, it was a test flight, of course. There was a lot of risk involved, an elevated risk because there was no crew on board, and you could take, shouldn't say liberties, but you could expand the envelope of what you needed to do in order to acquire the data that you were looking for in order to set the stage for the next mission when a crew will be on board. From a vehicle standpoint, sitting in these mission management teams, sitting with your engineers on a day-to-day basis, how much data did you acquire, and how long do you think it's going to take to pore over this so you write the textbook of Artemis 1?
Yeah, we acquired a ton of data during the mission. So one of the first things that we'll do post-mission is take several months to go back through that data, really dissect it, and understand the vehicle performance. You know, we did a lot of testing and analysis prior to the mission, but nothing really compares to seeing the vehicle perform in the harsh space environment. So that's certainly going to be our first focus after the mission is looking at all that data. And as you mentioned, you know, we pushed the vehicle further than we probably would with the crew on board, but through that, we learned a lot. We learned that the vehicle is more robust than we thought in many areas, and so taking that information and expanding our operational envelope will help as we go forward to more complex missions in the future.
And in the Orion Vehicle Integration Office, for yourself and your colleagues, it's almost like wearing two hats. You have to go back and pore over the data from this flight, but now you got to prepare a vehicle that will sustain a crew, including an environmental control system, a life support system for the crew itself. Going to juggle all of this work over the next couple of years.
Yeah, there is a lot of work that goes on in parallel. So as I mentioned, I think the post-flight review is going to be the top priority for the first few months. But at the same time, the crew module and the European Service Module for Artemis 2 is already at Kennedy Space Center. It's already being put through the paces in testing. So that vehicle is already there. After splashdown here, there are some avionics that we're going to take off of the Artemis 1 crew module, refurbish, and then install in the Artemis 2 crew module. And then, as you mentioned, we have the new environmental control and life support systems and a lot of other crew interfaces like crew displays, and all of that is in the process of being integrated and tested. So we celebrate Artemis 1 today, but tomorrow we get back to work and we start focusing heavily on Artemis 2 and making sure we have a successful first crewed mission.
You're going to have to delay those vacation plans just a little bit. Michelle Zahner from the Orion Vehicle Integration Office, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Back here in Mission Control, about an hour and 2 minutes now since the splashdown of Orion. Just about 5 nautical miles away from the USS Portland, which is approaching the vehicle, as well as Navy recovery teams. Back on the USS Portland, Daryl Nail from the Kennedy Space Center with the Exploration Ground Systems folks is with Captain John Ryan, the commanding officer of the vessel. Daryl?
Thanks, Rob, and Captain John Ryan here. Thanks for making the time to come and join us from off the bridge.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you being here. So far, this has been pretty amazing in terms of the completion of the mission. From your vantage point, how did you see it, and what are you seeing now?
Right now we have the orbital is in the water. Right now we're kind of in that 2 to 3 hour window where NASA and the Navy's EOD teams are conducting some tests. We're getting imagery and data for NASA, which will help support the future astronaut missions. And from perspective, honestly, I think this is one of the coolest things I've ever gotten to do. I've been in the Navy 23 years. I've done a lot of missions and I've been all over the world, but to be part of this NASA mission today is probably one of the coolest things I've ever been part of.
That's impressive, and that says a lot. As we look just behind us, Captain Ryan, and we see the operation currently in a moment of pause where they're waiting for the capsule to vent off the rest of its ammonia using its cooling system. We can see the Navy boats in the water. Currently, you've got the ship on a course heading going around this operation. What has been your instruction to your team commanding the ship?
So I just basically wanted to keep the ship within visual distance of the orbital and our teams in case they need anything. It also is providing, let's be honest, a lot of people are out here and they're super excited about this. Let's provide visual opportunities for people to get photos and, you know, get their digital part of being the history of this event. So, you know, a lot of time and effort and training and years of work went into this. So I want everybody to kind of get their moment, and we're out here getting ready to, you know, we'll be landing the helicopter soon and, you know, just being a part of it.
Certainly watching the sailors as it splashed down, they seem to really enjoy the completion of the splashdown part of the mission. You can see they're all smiles, cameras, and so that was good. You provided us with a perfect view of the rest of the operation. I want to talk a little bit about your ship, the USS Portland, and why it was chosen for this particular mission, and what strengths does it bring to this operation?
So the USS Portland is one of the newest of the San Antonio class LPDs. So
an LPD?
Landing platform docking ship. So this type of ship, normally known as an amphibious ship, in most of our missions we'd be working with the Marine Corps to embark their equipment and deliver them to foreign shores. But the capabilities of our ship can also be used, obviously, for missions like this. We have an enormous flight deck with an aviation department that we can land multiple various types of aircraft. We can put, obviously, a number of small boats in the water. And then probably the special feature, which NASA really likes, is we have a well deck, which we can later flood, and we will bring the orbital into the well deck to transport it back to San Diego.
Those are some great assets that you bring to the operation, and I also know on the next one, in Artemis 2, it'll be a critical component. The medical facilities that you have on board here, you could take care of somebody with any number of injuries, and in fact, I believe even have surgery if you need it.
Yes, we have a tremendous medical capability on board. Hopefully not that it will be needed, but we do have a operating room, medical staff, and a lot of ability to take care of personnel should anything, you know, not work out as designed.
This ship was just recently in Los Angeles at Fleet Week earlier this year.
Yes.
Got to show it off to the public, and that's a matter of pride, I imagine, for the team.
Absolutely. The ship has had a very busy year. The ship returned from an overseas deployment much earlier in the year, supported Los Angeles Fleet Week and also the Rim of the Pacific exercise this summer, which had about 20 nations participating. So it's been a very busy year for the ship, and I think this is really just kind of the cherry on top where you get to do an unusual mission and support history.
Tell me about the footprint that NASA takes up on this boat. I'm sure I haven't seen all of it. I've seen a lot of it, the well deck, certainly the equipment that we have running on the various decks outside and inside. It's pretty sizable.
Yes, this is a very good sized ship. We have plenty of room. NASA has about 150 engineers and various entities on board, which we have plenty of room for. This ship would normally deploy with upwards of 600 Marines on board, so NASA's footprint really isn't too bad. It's well within our capabilities.
Well, there's been plenty of room, and you've been a tremendous host to us, and so thank you, Captain John Ryan, for having us and for successfully bringing us to this part and this moment of the operation.
It's been an honor to support the NASA engineers and to be out there and be part of this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Captain John Ryan, the commanding officer of the USS Portland. And as we push out our view here in the Pacific Ocean, just 100 miles off the Baja Peninsula, you can see Orion now as a silhouette, still floating, the Orion Command Module with its CMIS bags. Those are the uprighting bags, fully deployed. It's in a stable condition. And to the right of that, you see the first Navy boat. That's a rigid hull boat. That one is the one that's going to get a little closer and provide a stabilizing tow line once it's been determined that the Navy boats can get a little closer. As we pan just to the right of that, you will see the remaining 4 boats. 2 of those boats are inflatable boats with Navy sailors aboard. Those Navy sailors will put hands on the capsule and secure it with ropes. They will then maneuver to bring that capsule to the rear of the USS Portland. The Portland will then throw out a more than 1,000-foot rope and then several 400-foot ropes. And that long rope will then attach to the capsule. It'll connect up and then begin pulling the Orion in. Now, this is a very complex operation. And think about this. That capsule does not have a keel, so it's a smooth bottom, 16.5 feet in diameter. So when it is pulled, it doesn't track in the water very well. So what has to happen is there are ropes attached to 4 points around the capsule that help stabilize it. Navy sailors, a team on each of the 4 ropes, and then on a 5th rope will be the winch. And that winch will apply enough pressure required, enough pulling force to bring that capsule into the well deck of the ship. At the moment, as we've been telling you, we are currently standing by awaiting ammonia boil-off. This is the coolant that's provided on the Orion capsule. It keeps the astronauts, should there, once they eventually go into the capsule and go on missions to the moon. Currently, no astronauts in this capsule, but we've got to vent off the ammonia nonetheless. The allotted time for that is 2 hours. And so we are just 1 hour and 10 minutes into that waiting period. And then once it's clear, you'll see those Navy boats get closer. But currently we are still standing by, waiting for the completion of ammonia boil-off. That's it, live from the deck of the USS Portland. Of course, we'll have more interviews for you as we go along. But for now, send it back to Rob Navius in Houston.
Thank you, Daryl. Looks like a beautiful day out there west of Baja, California. A lot of smiles here in Mission Control in Houston. We're about an hour and 11 minutes since the splashdown of Orion to wrap up its 25.5-day mission. Integral into the flight of Orion was the performance of the European service module that functioned perfectly to take Orion out of Earth orbit on its way to the moon, and did everything it was asked to do throughout the course of the flight. And joining us is Philippe Delou, who's the Orion European Service Module Program Manager from the European Space Agency. Philippe, congratulations. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and good afternoon.
Philippe, that service module went through its paces and was spot on every time it was asked to conduct a burn. Everything that it was planned to do was executed perfectly. Your thoughts on this mission?
Well, I have to say that I'm the happiest man in the world at the moment with the successful performance of the service module. She did what she was supposed to do, and even better. So it's a wonderful mission. I couldn't have dreamt more.
Now, the service module for the next flight, in which a crew will be on board, is at the Kennedy Space Center undergoing testing, and it's going to be a while for all of that hardware to come together, but you all are off and running on preparations for the next mission in a couple of years.
That's correct, yes. Well, we have already assembled the service module back in Europe and delivered it. Now it's being integrated with the crew module in Kennedy, and that's, if I don't mistake, should happen in the next summer.
Philippe, the work that the service module did, obviously invaluable. You can't conduct this mission without the work of the European service module. What kind of process was involved in getting to the point where the design of this mission, the requirements that the service module was asked to perform, and then ultimately conducted over the last 4 weeks. How did this evolution of this mission unfold for you and your team?
Well, this is a story that started quite a long time ago, in 2011, when there was a decision that the crew module would be built by Europe. So there's been a long process into setting up the requirements, proposing a design, discussing the design, also involving NASA, and agreeing on what should be the final design, take up the challenges which are associated with the design, eventually build the hardware, integrate it, and then preparing for the mission. So this has been a long way and a lot of work by the European Space Agency and the European industry.
And you know, down the hall where the International Space Station is controlled out of, ESA is a frequent flyer to the International Space Station, and the international partnership, of which ESA is such a critical contributor, is so valuable to human spaceflight now and in the years ahead. Talk a little bit about that.
That's clear. I mean, going to explore deep space is a challenge, is a big challenge. And we need all the excellence over the world in order to tackle that challenge and make it sustainable. Going there once, yes, is doable, but in order to go there on a regular basis and for a sustainable exploration of what is out there, first on the moon, then Mars, and then beyond, this will require all the forces and skills of the engineer around the world, and that was ESA and NASA. We have started that process with the Artemis program.
Philippe Delou, a little moment perhaps to sample some bubbly to celebrate this moment, but a lot of hard work ahead, and thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Philippe Delou, the European Service Module Program Manager, joining us here in Mission Control. Thank you, Philippe.
You're welcome.
This is Mission Control Houston, and all of the action now is focused on the USS Portland, west of Baja, California. My colleague Daryl Nail is there. Daryl?
Rob, thank you. Yep, we're here on the deck of the USS Portland, just 100 miles off the coast of Baja, Mexico, and I'm joined by Valerie Vinchulo. She is the General Dynamics Applied Physical Sciences Senior Engineer. Thanks for being here.
Yes, of course. Great.
So Valerie has some fresh information and analysis that she's been doing as it pertains to this operation, bringing the Orion command module into the well deck of the USS Portland. And so she has been looking at the wave heights with a system that you use, and tell me, you've just now analyzed the sea heights. What kind of sea heights are we dealing with, and what does that mean for the recovery of the Orion capsule out there in the ocean right now?
Yes, so we have two wave monitoring systems, two radars on board the ship. So we're monitoring the waves, measuring the Doppler velocity of the waves in the vicinity of the ship. So from that, we're able to get the significant wave height and where the direction of the waves are coming from along with the period. So right now we're seeing about 4 to 5 feet of waves at about 13 seconds from north-northwest. So with that information, we're able to provide a recovery heading for the ship that'll optimize, minimizing the motion in the well deck. So we're really trying to minimize that sloshing and bore wave in the well deck.
And that's a key point right there, Valerie. Of course, as I don't know if you could tell at home, but we're on the ship deck leaning back and forth to those 4 to 5 foot waves that we're dealing with out there in the ocean right now. So imagine Orion bobbing out there in the ocean, coming into a well deck where those waves come into the well deck. So what has been your recommendation to the team about how to deal with these waves as they bring that capsule close?
Right, so right now we're recommending a recovery course of 320 to kind of mitigate that motion. So we're kind of looking at the roll of the ship to minimize that sloshing wave, and the course of 320 is looking like the best for that recovery. That will give us a little bit of a bore wave that we're going to experience, but it's something that we think we can deal with, and we're looking forward to the recovery.
This is important because, of course, inside the well deck, I've heard it explained that once those waves come in, and then the ship, as it's moving about, creates a big wave pool inside.
Yes, yeah.
That's not good for a spacecraft that you're trying to stabilize.
No, you don't. You really want to minimize those motions to the best of our ability, and in doing so, we're just looking at everything out there, all the waves, what we're dealing with, and we have hydrodynamic ship models of the ship and of the well deck, so we're running through all of our models live, taking the live radar data, and just trying to provide the best information available here.
And so when they have that information, what is your role after you've given? Do you continue to monitor? Are you active?
Yes, we're constantly monitoring and running the system. We're always recording data to analyze later, so constantly doing that. And we'll provide little tweaks and updates, as we get closer. But once they've started flooding, we're really on that course. So we'll just keep monitoring what's going on.
Those two radars on the ship, where are they located and what frequency are they using?
So they're located on the 05, and it's an X-band radar, and over here on the 04s, we have two, and that gives us, putting them both together, gives us full 360 degrees, which is what you want. You want to be able to see all the waves around the ship, and they're actually an X-band radar that's been vertically polarized, so we can see the Doppler velocity as it's coming in to calculate that wave height and the swells and the wind waves in the direction they're coming in.
That's high-tech stuff. I mean, it's, you've got Doppler radar. Many people may be familiar with how that helps with weather, telling our audience and weather people where the weather is, where the storm clouds are, but it literally can map out in 3 dimensions the waves around the ship.
Yes, yeah, so we're looking, a lot of X-band radars, they're looking for targets, right? Another ship, avoidance, but we've polarized our radars to try to look at the waves, and just what other people might consider noise is what we want to capture.
That's interesting. It's just the opposite of what it's typically used for.
Yep.
Well, Valerie, last question I want to ask you. You've been on the ship since we departed San Diego on Wednesday.
Yes.
It's been a long journey to get to this point, this weather alternate spot where the seas are much lower. They're now 12 feet or so off of San Diego, so this is certainly something you probably appreciate.
Yes, yes.
But let me ask you about that operation and looking out there and seeing that space capsule in the water. What was like that for you watching?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. It's something I will probably remember the rest of my life. Hearing that sonic boom and then seeing the chutes, oh my gosh, it was incredible.
Valerie Minchulo, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
All right, Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Daryl. The work continues out in the Pacific, where you have the Orion spacecraft with all 5 of its uprighting system bags fully inflated, following its splashdown 1 hour, 21 minutes ago at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, to wrap up a mission of 1.4 million miles that spanned 25 and a half days, a mission that saw the vehicle launch from the Kennedy Space Center atop the Space Launch System, the maiden flight of the world's most powerful rocket. An hour and a half after launch, Orion was sent out of Earth orbit in its translunar injection to begin a voyage out to what is called a distant retrograde orbit, a highly elliptical racetrack-shaped orbit that enabled Orion to be put through its paces for almost a month, gathering all the data that it needed and that the Orion program and mission managers had hoped for, and more. All of the engineering data that will set the tone and answer a lot of the questions that will pave the way for the Artemis 2 mission, in which a crew will be placed on board the vehicle in a couple of years for a orbital mission around the moon, again in a highly elliptical orbit, a mission that would be about 10 days in length or so. That crew yet to be named, but the pace will pick up after the first of the year in fairly dramatic fashion as the work continues to prepare the Space Launch System, the next Space Launch System rocket, and the Artemis 2 Orion vehicle to support a crew during its mission around the moon and back to Earth. In the meantime, a number of test objectives are still underway for the vehicle, most notably characterizing the thermal environment of the Orion spacecraft itself. Orion endured temperatures of up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit during its high-speed entry out of lunar orbit and back into the Earth's atmosphere, where it slammed into the atmosphere at 25 times the speed of sound, and then underwent a skip entry maneuver, basically skipping into the atmosphere, then dipping back out of the atmosphere again, and then back into the atmosphere to bleed off excess energy. An important maneuver that was designed and executed to perfection to bleed off excess inertia and to gain data on how we can better bring in multiple splashdown sites if required in the Pacific for future crewed missions. All of the chutes were deployed in good shape. The three main chutes deployed as planned. They reefed to their full extent, and Orion gently splashed down. After entering the Earth's atmosphere at 25 times the speed of sound, it splashed down at a meager velocity of just 19 miles an hour. Very gentle splashdown velocity had a crew been on board. And here's a replay of the final seconds for Orion as it descended below a deck of clouds at about 1,700 feet of scattered clouds. That was the final deck. The Spaceflight Meteorology Group had forecast very benign conditions for Orion. It did play out exactly that way as Orion touched down at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time. And there was splashdown. The chutes were cut automatically. The 5 crew module uprighting system inflatable bags inflated with helium gas as planned, and Orion is gently bobbing out with the Navy divers very, very close to the spacecraft. It's going to take several hours for them to hook up the equipment that they need to haul the vehicle into the well deck of the USS Portland and to bring it back to port. Back here in Mission Control, the entry team of flight controllers watching the data of the post-splashdown test objectives. in which data is being acquired on the thermal characteristics of Orion. There'll be a restart of the ammonia boiler system to gain data on long range and extra cooling for the vehicle that will be in the offing when a crew gets on board. We'll be talking more about the crew aspect of what lies ahead a couple of years from now, a short time from now. But now it is time to go back to what is a very busy place on the USS Portland, and my colleague Daryl Nail. Daryl?
Thanks, Rob. Yep, I'm here with Cody Kelly, who is the National Affairs Manager in the Search and Rescue Office at NASA. In terms of your job, we had good visual today of the capsule coming down. We clearly have the visual right now. We can see it in the water.
Yes, sir.
We know where it is. But that might not always be the case. The capsule may be beyond our visual sight, as well as in Artemis 2, the astronauts. Tell me about what your role is and how you help find out where they are in a situation like that.
Yes, sir. My name again, Mike Cody Kelly. I work in our SAR mission office. Basically, we work with all of our federal and international partners to ensure that our spacecraft are interoperable with the Search and Rescue Satellite-Aided Tracking System, or the SARSAT system. So today for Artemis 1, we tested out the vehicle tri-band beacon, which was using swept tones for the helicopters that are flying around behind us to be able to locate that spacecraft in kind of what we call the terminal area, which is within about a 1 nautical mile where you can get visuals, as well as the 406 megahertz beacons that were on the capsule, as well as what the astronauts are going to wear in Artemis 2. We were using what's called the SAR Intelligent Terminal, or the SAINT application, which is a system that ties into our ground station at the Goddard Space Flight Center to pull in all of the data from these beacons so that we can see them anywhere in the world. And that's incredibly important, especially when we have crewed missions where if we had some kind of emergency abort or some kind of landing, we'd have to be able to get data to our DoD partners extremely fast, even if they're landing internationally. And this is something that we do for all of our human spaceflight programs, but Artemis really has a kind of special place in my heart because all of this effort started way back in 2016 with URT-5. So we actually demonstrated some of our advanced technologies on URT-5 and slowly was able to be integrated with the landing and recovery team to provide them that key data on the day of landing and if there was any kind of emergency. The astronauts are going to wear what's called the Angel beacons, which are the advanced next generation emergency locator beacons that are located on their life preserver equipment, and that's going to be able to track an astronaut if they had to get out of the capsule, if there was an ammonia leak or some kind of emergency, as well as tying that into what the vehicle telemetry is saying to be able to give a good SAR picture to these guys that are flying helicopters looking for survivors or being able to go rescue astronauts.
And so let's talk a little bit about that further. The astronauts will be wearing GPS, essentially they're GPS locators, right?
Exactly, yes, sir.
They're beacons. And then, of course, the crew module itself has a tri-beacon.
Yes, sir.
So how do you delineate between those two?
And that's really the power of our ground station and all these web applications. They're two different legacy beacons. You have a first-generation SARSAT beacon, which is what you have on a standard boat. Even the ship itself has a first-generation beacon. And then we have what is called a second-generation beacon, which is an advanced waveform that's specifically for the astronauts themselves. In our application, we're able to actually identify each of those beacon IDs and tie them to a specific crew member so that when they turn it on, we know exactly whose beacon that is and exactly where it's at. And the power behind that is with these emerging technologies, we're able to do this even if we have bad GPS connection or we're really anywhere in the world. And this is the kind of stuff that you can have is you go to a vendor and buy it for your boat. If you're out hiking, we're using those technologies for civilians for astronaut use and kind of vetting it out here, out in the open ocean, knowing that astronauts are really one of our prime customers.
So you ran a test today, right?
Yes.
As this operation was unfolding, the crew module was sending out its beacon, its tri-beacon, but then you also had those Angel beacons for the astronauts. They were what? You put them on the boats,
yeah,
right?
we put them on the ribs or the rigid hulls inflatable boats that are out there tending the capsule, as well as on the fantail of the ship. What we're doing is we're looking to make sure the air crews could delineate between these various beacons if the crew members ever had to get out, as well as looking at the performance of the vehicle tri-band beacon after it's spent almost 2 weeks in space. So we're looking at not only today's technology but tomorrow's technology to kind of serve Artemis emerging partners and really the folks that are going to be in harm's way on a daily basis.
Your test was part of the operation today, and how did it perform?
It went phenomenally. I can't give more kudos to the crew of the Portland, 1st Air Force Det 3, setting that all up with the Navy, the Air Force, as well as some of our national partners in the U.S. StarSat program that made this all happen. So it was really a team effort, and it went flawlessly, just like this mission. So I couldn't be more happy.
And you could clearly identify the capsule and the 2 Angel beacons. I mean, it was clear as day.
It was clear as day, and we've been working on this application for over 2 years with this mission in mind, and it executed flawlessly. And the coders and developers at Goddard Space Flight Center did a phenomenal job being able to get this ready on time, on mission, and on location.
Cody Kelly, Manager of National Affairs, Search and Rescue Office at NASA. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Great job out there, by the way, throughout the course of the day. A great view of Orion as it sits passively in the fairly calm waters of the Pacific, west of Baja California. With me here, sitting very calmly, veteran astronaut Randy Bresnik. Randy, thanks for joining us today. You have been an integral part of the preparation of not only this mission, but all of the astronaut office activities associated with requirements that will ultimately lead to putting a crew on the next vehicle that will orbit the moon in 2 years. What did you see today that A, thrilled you, and B, was most important for you to see as a result of all the work that has gone in to make this mission possible?
That is a great question, Rob, and thanks for letting me come join you guys this morning. Certainly watching the team throughout the past 26 days was certainly the culmination of seeing that and walking in here and see this team be able to see the fruits of their labors. Seeing that we have a launch platform that was nearly flawless, practically flawless, getting our Orion uphill, and then having our service module, give us power and the flight control and the burns that all went off so well with so small residuals, we hardly had to do any trimming. And it was then great to see all the cameras that we put on that vehicle to bring everybody along on the mission, and put selfie as a word that we use now in spaceflight, and Artemis 1 getting the selfies while we were up there. And then certainly everyone holding their breath as we did the burns to get into the distant retrograde orbit, and then get out of the distant retrograde orbit, and then be able to make the trim burns to be able to get right, hit entry interface as accurately as we did here. See the service module separate, which is another big milestone, and then see the last few minutes of flight with Orion flying on its own for the very first time, and then see how well it controlled itself, and how the forward big cover came off on time, the drogues came out, slowed it down, mains came out, and we landed 2.5 miles from the pinpoint bullseye, and we had expected maybe 5.5 miles. So it was awesome to see all of that, and that whole collection is what gives us confidence for the next time. All of these things that were individually areas of concern have now been proven in flight.
We've talked often during the course of the broadcast today about the fact that this is the 50th anniversary of Apollo 17's landing on the moon. Gene Cernan, Jack Schmitt, past his prologue, as they say. And now, from an astronaut office perspective, as you look down the road over the next 2 years, a lot of work to do, but certainly a leg up on what we think will be a launch in the 2024 timeframe.
Absolutely. The post-flight data reduction and everything else will be amazing to see in the next few weeks and months. But starting next week, we're right into Artemis 2 continuum processing. We got Artemis 2 crew module and service module sitting there at KSC right now, going through its final, their final assembly, and then we have to do the verification, validation, test out, and make sure everything's working. And things like systems like the ECLIS system, which we didn't have on this, and so the first time that we're flying with that system will be when crew are on board, and so that'll be a really important, thorough checkout here on the deck. Certainly, in the next quarter, ideally assigning the crew to it, so that we can start building their spacesuits, getting them involved in training, and getting them ready to go in that 2-year mark. And hopefully we will either meet or beat that 2-year mark. And so that'll be exciting to see if we can move that fast to continue the momentum that we got from this flight.
And an interesting flight design for Artemis 2, where another highly elliptical orbit around the moon. This is not like your father's Apollo 8, where we simply orbited almost at an equatorial nature, but we're going to be chasing the interim cryogenic propulsion stage as well.
Yeah, certainly. when you look at how bold Apollo was, we had never been to the moon. We didn't know we could do it. We planned on having Apollo 7, and we flew that crew module in low Earth orbit. And then Apollo 8, we launched it around the moon, and it stunned the world, and proved to ourselves, that we could do this. Well, guess what? We're doing that in one mission on Artemis 2. We're doing Apollo 7 and 8 combined. So that is a bold statement and audacious goal for NASA to set. And like you said, the highly elliptical orbit that we launch up in here in Earth, so we can launch out, get into a 24-hour orbit to check out that environmental and life control system, such that we know that we can breathe. We know that the cooling works. We know that all the systems work. Scrub the CO2, take out the humidity, to try the exercise device. So we know that by the time we end that period and we do the translunar injection burn, we know that we're good to go for the next 9 days to be able to get around the moon and come on back. All of that just buying down risk, proving out the systems, so that when we go to Artemis 3, we combine not only Apollo 9, which is the first flight of the LEM in low Earth orbit, Apollo 10, which took the LEM to lunar orbit and flew down near to the surface, then came back, and Apollo 11 landing. We do all those 3 of those missions in one. And that is very exciting, very bold, and it has got to be exciting to anybody that's in the space program, is interested in the space program, or the young people out there who are the first future space explorers who will be on those later Artemis missions.
I have a question, Randy. Space is no stranger to you. You've spent quite a bit of time, shuttle flight, long-duration mission on the International Space Station. But if there was a singular image from the last 25 and a half days that sticks with you, that drove it home, that we were going well beyond the Earth, what would that be?
It would certainly be the missions where we were on the far part, where we were 268,000 miles away from Earth, and you saw Earth rise over the moon, and thinking that the next time we take those pictures, that could be with somebody behind the back of the camera, not the vehicle taking it himself.
It's going to be an interesting couple of years, a very exciting couple of years, and Randy Bresnik, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, and congratulations to our Artemis team everywhere all over the world. They deserve a very well-deserved day off after this mission, but certainly looking forward to the next 2 years where we are able to take that and capitalize on it, and, as we say, wash, rinse, repeat.
Copy that. Thank you, Randy. Appreciate it.